Welcome back to the Data for Good podcast. This week we're joined by Evgeni Hasin, who is Director for Data Analytics at WeFox, bringing over 15 years of experience in data analytics and business intelligence. He really excels at building stellar data teams and leveraging data to drive strategic decision making. What are we talking about today? We're talking data democratization. We're talking about why it's important and why it's so valuable to be discussing this right now, self-service analytics, as well as adoption challenges within this area. And a huge question is, why are we investing so much in data? What is the ROI and what are we looking to get out of it? Great episode. Enjoy. Welcome, Evgeni. Thank you for joining us on the Data for Good podcast. Today, we're here to talk about data democratization. So why is that important and why have we chosen to talk about that today?
Great question. Thank you for having me. I see data democratization as an inevitable outcome when you want to scale data beyond a certain threshold. When you want to approach data at scale, if you keep everything centralized, you eventually will reach a point where the communication overhead, alignment overhead, just being a bottleneck for the entire organization becomes a big issue for you. Mm-hmm. Many big organizations tried different approaches to cope with this. Some decentralize certain functions. Some go to decentralization in sense of having different data teams and different business units completely independent from one another. Mm-hmm. Those approaches have upsides and downsides, but eventually it's unavoidable. You cannot have one huge big data team as a big kind of monolithic organization that is the threshold for all insights and all data utilization in the organization. Mm-hmm. Beyond a certain threshold, it just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. So if we start right at the beginning of a journey, a data journey, we're talking small 10 max data teams. It's going to be centralized, right?
Yeah. Usually when you have, let's say organization below 100 employees, startup company, you would have sometimes bigger, sometimes smaller, maybe none at all. But let's say you have a small data team, 2-3 people. They are capable of supporting most of the stakeholders. Many stakeholders can support themselves, mm-hmm. especially in tech companies. And you are able to fix capacity issues quite quickly by just adding additional people to the team. Mm-hmm. Actually, productivity goes up significantly in the smaller teams. If you add 2 engineers to a team of 2-3 engineers, you maybe quadruple your effectiveness because people now kind of cross-pollinate each other and ideas flow and they can build things that really leverage collaboration much better than before. And it works out very, very well. But the same approach doesn't work when you reach, let's say, 40-50 people. Many problems start before that. But when you really reach 40-50 people in the data team, you become extremely specialized. You have most likely dedicated verticals. Yeah. Data engineering, data analytics, BI, machine learning, data science. Packets of work starting flowing between those teams. Every time alignment needs to be reached, tickets needs to be raised, different blockers and bottlenecks needs to be alleviated. If you throw additional 10 people into that, you will gain very close to zero additional productivity. This just doesn't scale at this point.
Yeah. What are the initial indicators? What are the first signs of it starting to crack? I mean, it'd be great to scale this up and keep increasing productivity the more engineers you hire. But yeah, what are the first signs?
When you start getting friction in the team, mm-hmm. when you start getting complaints, the business analyst did not write the requirements right, or the engineers did not comply with our specifications correctly. When you have specialization reaching a point where people only see part of the picture, and they really need to rely on very well documented requirements, and this is an oxymoron actually. You cannot ever reach a point when you documented everything and there is no interpretation possible, and everything is clear. You always have some uncertainty. Even with the best written tickets, you can always interpret them in different ways. When you get to the point where your leadership in the team spending their time, instead of looking forward for new opportunities, when they start spending their time on resolving friction points between the team members, this is where you reach your maximum capacity. Actually, there is an effective number of people you can really have close working relationships with.
Yeah.
I believe I read it last in the book called Team Topologies. Very interesting book. I highly recommend it. There is a certain number, I believe it was around 15 people. The theory says that you can have intimate, close relationships of trust with maximum 10, 15 people. Beyond that, those would be acquaintances. You familiar with the person, but you don't really have this intimacy level and this trust level, and you have very let's say low motivation to go beyond, above and beyond, to help this person out, right? So having a team larger than 15 people, you will probably start dividing it to sub teams, squads, whatever it is in your organization, right? And then you will start getting friction points between those squads. And until a certain point, this is manageable with good leadership that really works hard to ensure collaboration and cooperation and alignment between the different teams. But when you reach, I believe, 40, 50 people, even that is not enough anymore, and you just cannot scale.
No, and this isn't a new problem. It's, as data teams are starting to mature, probably getting through the adolescent stage and catching up with things like areas like software development, decentralization is an approach that's come up. How long have you been aware of decentralization in particular?
I would say for the last 2 years, this is really bothering me, because we had a huge data team at VFox. We had a team of over 50 people, and I really experienced this close hand, this kind of friction points between team members. And some of the things we did to work differently, going cross-functional, really going closer to the business, decentralizing, really showed great results, alleviating those friction points.
So some of the approaches that you've worked on off the back of this, off these frustrations?
Yeah. So many companies adopt the data mesh approach. This is kind of the hottest new paradigm to data, right? Data mesh is all about domain-oriented cross-functional teams, bringing the data closer to the business, making the data part of the products of the domains produce, and not a byproduct that is kind of generated by doing business. Somebody owns the data, somebody takes responsibility and ownership of the data, and you have all the relevant functions within the cross-functional domain team to, first of all, take care of their own internal needs, but also publish data packaged as data products, highly curated, reliable, monitored, reusable data sets that are then exposed as a service or as a product to other teams, and come together into one big orchestrated, chaotic data repository that is composed of different data products deployed by different teams, but working in concert to make those interoperable and kind of be able to combine them together to get more complicated, more advanced solutions. This is much, much more easier said than done. Many organizations try different approach. I don't believe anybody implemented data mesh strictly by the book. But it's those are good principles. Those are principles that work.
Yeah.
And it's mostly about organizational change before anything else. You really need to have a mature organization that understands the bottlenecks that are kind of unavoidable with a centralized approach, and really invest to undergo organizational transformation in this good direction. Um, Different companies adopt the chapter, tribe. Don't remember the exact terminology, but
Yeah.
Spotify is one of them. Netflix is another. Right, when you have kind of matrix reporting lines,
Yeah.
you have your vertical reporting lines when every data engineer is reporting to engineering manager, who is reporting to maybe head of data engineering, to set the professional tone, set the standards, set the best practices, right? But they also report to specific domain units.
Tribes and
Set
squads.
the tone. Yeah, exactly. Tribes, squads, chapters,
Yeah.
etc. Right? So you have your data engineering tribe, right? But then you have squads that are oriented around the business, really close to the business. You have cross-functional squads that have people from different verticals, from different tribes in them. And then you have kind of these dual reporting lines. You get your priorities and you are working based on incentives and timelines and goals of a certain business unit, but your professional growth and development is coming from the chapter, from the vertical. Um, it, Different companies try different approach, but it doesn't really matter which one you do, as long as you realize that you have to adapt some sort of decentralization, right? Whatever it is, it cannot stay the monolithic structure that only works in small numbers.
So, in theory, it sounds amazing. It should be easy to implement, but there's going to be trade-offs. There's going to be challenges. What are the main ones we need to be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, so let's take data mesh as an example, right? So assuming you implement a data mesh, you will have cross-functional domain-oriented teams.
Yeah.
How do you then address issues like data governance, right? Because you cannot let every team decide on their own what would be the rules they are operating based on, because their products needs to come together with other teams' products, right? And access management and especially computational access management, you need to have certain set of rules and share baseline between the different teams. And without the central data function, right, the whole point was to decentralize, right? If you decentralize everything fully, you don't have a central data function anymore. Who is owning the governance responsibilities? So the data mesh book itself suggests something called federated governance, right? Different data teams send a representative, and then you have like kind of like a council, and they meet once a month, let's say, and then decide on different kind of things.
Yeah.
Never seen that happen yet. Democracy works to a certain extent, right? But I don't think we figured this one out yet. And I hope that maybe one of the listeners will point us wrong, right? And maybe share some great examples when this works extremely well. Ownership is the key with decentralization, because when you don't have a central authority or a central leader or role, you can point the finger to, not in a bad way, right? But say, this is their part, right? If they mess this up, this is on them, right? If something needs to be addressed, we have somebody to contact, somebody to speak to, somebody to refer the issue to. If you don't have this kind of clarity, who is owning what part of the data supply chain, you will have a problem, your users will have a problem, right? So this really needs to be clearly documented and communicated. But above and beyond everything else, people need to feel this ownership intrinsically. They need to understand that they are responsible for a certain part of the supply chain, and this is on them. So communication, alignment, those would be the main issues that need to be addressed. And it really takes certain level of maturity and talent density in the organization for this to work.
And something we spoke about before as well that goes hand in hand with this is self-service analytics. It goes alongside data decentralization.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Self-service analytics would be, for me, the core value proposition of data democratization, right? Because
is it the end goal? Is it the kind of the Valhalla?
It's I wouldn't say it's the only goal. It's definitely one of the goals, but it's kind of one of the pillars of data democratization. If we decompose data democratization to its components, right? What does this really mean? Do we really expect that there is no central data function at all in the organization? Not necessarily so, because of the governance and ownership issues, right? Somebody needs to take ultimate responsibility. Eventually, you need some central functions. Also, it doesn't make sense that every single domain builds their own platform components, right? Maybe you should have a centralized data platform team that facilitates all the other teams. So data platform components, probably not a good idea to democratize those. But analytics, on the other hand, was always an area that was really close to the business. And it's really a good approach to have centralized data platform with decentralized analytics capabilities. What does this really mean is that you expect the business units and the different functions in the organization to be first data savvy, understand how data works, where to obtain data, how to use it, basic data analytics skills, basic data visualization skills. You would expect this to be something that the domain own, like you would expect them to write their own emails. You probably do not remember the days when senior leaders in organizations had secretaries, and those secretaries or office assistants or whatever they were called, they would take dictations and type the messages for their bosses, right? This is unbelievable that this existed.
Going back some time, but wow,
right? So today, maybe in some organizations, it's unimaginable that the business will build their own dashboards and be self-sufficient building their own reports. But going, 15 years into the future, with the advancements in AI and LLM technology in particular, I'm not sure we will even have a dashboard, right? We'll just interact natural language-wise with some sort of a prompt and get all the insights immediately. And if you need somebody to mitigate between you and the data, right, you would speak to a person and the person will have to engineer a prompt from you. I don't see this happening, right? I see people interacting with data directly. And I see at VFox many power users picking up tools like Power BI, other very intuitive data visualization, data analytics tools, and building their own stuff with proper support from the central data team. And this is what self-service analytics is all about. Outsourcing the more business-related components of data, especially with BI, analytics, direct insights and decision-making kind of tools that support decision-making, outsourcing those components to the business, empowering the business to master those capabilities, pick up the tools, understand how basic data methodology works, and be able to be self-sufficient and do this on their own.
I mean, we're seeing SQL more and more on product manager job descriptions as
absolutely.
As an example.
Absolutely. And this would be actually the first sign of a really mature organization with really great and high talent density, when you see that being data savvy is a requirement pretty much in every role.
And taking a bit of ownership, like you say. Now, one big question that jumps out, it sounds like a lot of time. a lot of money invested as well. So, how is this going to cause return on investment? How are we assessing that we're getting data from all this being implemented?
Yeah, so this is really a question of how do you measure the value or the return on investment from the investment in data, right? But first, in order to approach this, we need to understand that when you invest in self-service analytics, what this actually means is that you transition your data team from classical development engineering roles to more a supporting function enabling other units, right? And maybe we can take a moment to talk about this. What kind of people do we need to make this kind of
Yeah.
transformation, right? But essentially, the way we did this in VFox was by creating two dedicated squads. First, we created data ops squad that took responsibility for configuration, deployment, data quality, governance, all the technical aspects of working with data solutions,
Yeah.
away from the non-technical business user, enabling the business user to focus in on the KPIs, on the insights, on building reports, telling great stories with their dashboards, building data applications, and not worrying about how to deploy it properly, how to manage their test versus development versus production environments, how to share it with the right users. All the technical parts were handled by a dedicated squad, and this was kept a centralized squad, service-oriented, supporting squad for the rest of the bigger analytical community. And the second thing we did was to actually pioneer and spearhead this analytics community at VFox, identifying power users across the organization and then curating training materials and workshops for them, building initial turnkey kind of projects for them so we can hand it over, so they kind of inherit a baseline solution they can then upgrade and scale up any way they want, but they don't have to start from zero. This is kind of data evangelist function. They would go identify talent across the organization, empower this talent with the skill set, training, support, consultation, anything they need to pick up the tools and start building their own projects. And together with the data ops squad, we really saw um, growing adoption rate of self-service analytics, right? So in terms of investment, the investment was building self-service data platform, which was an engineering challenge, centralizing all relevant usable data, packaged as data products in a centralized data warehouse, analytical data warehouse, exposing the different data products on via data product catalog, designing this data product catalog to kind of speak the business language, not a technical language, being accessible to people from the business to understand how to use and find the data they need, and creating the data ops team and the analytics community team to facilitate this change, right? This is what investment we are talking about, right? So none of it can be measured on a project to project basis, right? Because let's say you have a challenge, you need to build a pricing model. You talk with your engineers and they tell you it will take 3 months, you will need 5 FTEs, and you will need this kind of tool that we need to acquire externally. You can then quantify this and you know, okay, this will be €500,000, whatever, right? Then you can compare it to what kind of revenue boost or whatever other KPI, business relevant KPI in this case.
Yeah.
You can compare the two together and say, okay, does it worth it for me to invest this €500,000? Will I get 1 million back, or will I get only 100,000 back, right? And the question of ROI becomes very easy. You cannot analyze investment in self-service analytics with the same tools, because when you start, you don't know what would be the end state. You don't know where you're going to end. you don't know where this journey ends for your organization. You cannot expect all the initiatives and all the different insights and reports and apps that the business will generate using the platform that you will provide for them.
Yeah.
And you cannot really compare investment going in with what you expect to get out, right? What you can do is look at it from a different perspective, right? So everybody is asking, what would be the ROI of investing in data? And
Yeah.
I encourage you to ask a different question. What would be the ROI of not investing in data, right? So let's say if you have a certain capacity, you have a team of 10 people, engineers, analysts, whatever, right? And you have certain cloud tools, and you have that require licensing or whatever, and whatever other resources you put into this. You can quantify how much your investment in data is going to be in euros. This is a bound and finite figure, and you fully control how this figure develops
Yeah.
using basic business tools like budgeting and other management tools, right? You cannot just double the size of the data team anytime you want, right? It's a process, and you have the ability to control it. So you know exactly how much it costs you, right? But if you don't invest, you do not know how much you are going to lose by not capitalizing on a great business opportunity that you missed because you didn't have the insights pointing you in the right direction. You do not know upfront how much value you are going to lose if you made the wrong business decisions or pursue a strategy that is not going to work out for you, right? We are talking about potentially um, survival threatening events that might happen to companies. And we saw that before in many occasions, right? When companies missed great opportunities, companies really didn't invest in the right products, in the right markets. Small companies like startups, but also large companies like big organizations like WeWork, for example, would be a recent example. Um, when you have no ability to understand your decisions based on facts and running experiments
Yeah.
and really analyzing your product features with concrete, tangible KPIs, what would be your potential loss? It would be unbounded one, right? You cannot quantify that in
Right.
a sense. So consider investment in data kind of like an insurance policy, right? You are paying a fixed premium, which you know and you can control exactly how much that would be for you. But then you are doing your best, your maximum to avoid those potential loss of value by making bad decisions or missing great opportunities by not investing in data at all.
So it's like an insurance, and you're spreading your risk.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a risk mitigating effort. So to put it in a concrete example, right? You have a central data team.
Yeah.
They are probably a bottleneck in your organization, and they have to prioritize only the most important, but it's really not the most important. It's probably the most urgent tasks, right? They serve the customers, the stakeholders that scream the loudest, and probably neglecting some very important stuff that they just simply cannot reach, right? Um, this approach will not work out for you, right? So if you invest the additional effort to decentralize your data functions, empower your business with abilities to adopt self-service analytics and do more on their own, you will probably alleviate this bottleneck, right?
Yeah.
You won't see necessarily immediate ROI. You wouldn't be able to measure it. You will probably see it, just not in a tangible way. You wouldn't be able to measure it, but you will be able to say that this additional investment cost us an extra, I don't know, 10% of the data budget, right? But this is the insurance premium we pay to make sure that we did the maximum we could to avoid losing business opportunities or investing in the wrong products or the wrong distribution channels or the wrong customers because we didn't have the visibility and we were clogged with the centralized data.
Yeah. So we've made this 10% investment on insurance to spread our risk. Where can it go? Where can it go wrong? What have we got to be cautious of?
That's a great question. I'd say self-service analytics, more than anything else, it's a marketing challenge, not a technical one, right? So why am I saying a marketing challenge? So you're probably familiar with the tech adoption curve, right? You have this bell distribution curve, right? On the very left side, you have your early adopters, your enthusiasts. Then you have the majority in the middle, and then you have the laggards that probably use fax machines to this day, right? So forget about those. You will never onboard those. Those are lost cause, right? But between the majority of the on the adoption curve, right, and the early adopters, there is a certain chasm, there is a certain gap, right? So the early adopters, they are passionate about technology, they are passionate about data. They would come to you before you will even offer in any structured way self-service analytics. They would demand direct access to your database. You always have these 10, 15, 20, 50 users that really want to be on the cutting edge. You can probably hire them into your data team and they would fit right in. Although they come from the business, and you don't need to do anything to onboard them. You don't need to invest anything. They will adapt their ways of working to what you have to offer, to the technology you provide, right? But when you come to onboard the majority, and this is where it really counts, right? We're talking about, let's say, 65 to 70% of your potential. Of self-service oriented power users across the organization to pick up the tools and do their own stuff, right? You will encounter the majority. They break into two groups, right? Half of them we would classify as pragmatists. They would adopt new technology when you prove to them it makes sense and it works. And then you have your conservatives that will adopt it when it really doesn't make any sense to do things any differently, right? They would be the last to adopt it, but they will eventually after everybody else did, right? So let's talk about the pragmatists. You really need to win the pragmatists over. The challenge of winning the pragmatists, there are two challenges. Challenge number one is that they don't care about the technology. They have a business process. It's maybe not the most efficient one, maybe not the most effective one, maybe not the most successful one, but it's one they have and it works for them. It works for them for quite some time. This is how they are doing business. This is the status quo. And they really risk averse. They don't want to try something new to screw up what they already have. So they really want to see another pragmatist just like them to adopt the tools first and prove to them that it actually works. It's safe, it's reliable, it's worthy to go into production, and you can actually switch to that, right? When these kind of people think about apps, right, they don't think about applications, they think about appliances, right? They go to a store, they buy a fridge, they come home, they plug it in, open the door, lights go on, the food is cold. No configuration, no setup, no changing anything on how they operate and how they work, and no any overhead adapting their ways of doing things to you, right? They want the appliance to serve them, right? So they're really looking for a reference from other pragmatists, right? And a reference from an early adopter will not do any good here, right? Because this is a very different mentality. And we're really looking for what we call the whole product solution approach, right? When you have a comprehensive solution tailored for their needs, catering to the nuances and the very specifics of how they are doing stuff, and they don't really want to adapt anything of what they do to you, right? And if The only thing you do is provide a self-service data platform, provide the tools, provide the training, build the data ops team to provide the support they need. You will only get the early adopters. You will get the first 15% and you will miss the other 70%. Because it's not about, you really need to make it not easy to sell. You need to make it easy to buy for them, right? You need to make it easy for them to opt in. So making it easy to sell would be focusing on the number of data products you deploy every week, right? Or how quickly your queries run, or how quickly you can integrate a new data source. All of this will excite engineers, and none of those pragmatist business users will care about this at all. If you want to make it easy for them to buy, you need to talk about how your new data product is going to shave 2 days from the monthly financial closing cycle, right? How this new dashboard can enable you increase your revenue by 10%, or how this new pricing model can predict monthly run rate more accurately, 30% more accurately than whatever they used before that, right? This is what they care about. So you really need to package it in a solution, comprehensive solution that addresses their needs, and your training materials and onboarding programs and turnkey projects, all of this needs to be tailored to cater for their particular needs. This would be one huge challenge to achieve widespread organization-wide adoption, right? And then you need to identify this one particular leader in your organization, one particular team that would benefit from your solutions the most, that really has this big pain point your solution can solve, and you need to focus on them all of your attention, because it will take everything you have to onboard this first customer. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. They would look for a reference, but you need first customer to generate this reference, right? So you really need somebody to take the leap of faith with you. You really need to have social equity in the organization. You really need to establish yourself as a partner for the business, and not only a technical function. Really demonstrate that you can understand how business thinks, what are the challenges that the business faces, and really find this one partner that trusts you enough to take this leap of faith with you. Tailor everything you build specifically for this team. Make sure it's really, really easy for them to opt in, and it's really making much more sense to adopt the new ways versus the old ones, right? Using techniques like MVP, prototyping, etc., one step at a time. And once you get this first team to join, you use them as reference to bring the next one, maybe a bigger one, more complicated one, with people that are even less data oriented. Then you use the reference from that one to bring the next one, until you cover all the pragmatists, and then the late adopters will have no choice. They will have to join, right? So actually, if we're talking about ROI, you won't see a hockey stick return on investment here, right? When you invest and nothing happens, and then you have this exponential growth at one point. This is not how it works. Self-service analytics investments work like a staircase. You find one team, you invest, you have no return at all, then you have a spike. And then you invest in the next one, you have a spike, and then the next one, you have a spike, then the next one. And you have some sort of synergy developing with interoperable data products that those teams generate that really feed then other teams, make things easier for other teams. And eventually you will start seeing some exponential effect of growth, but it will take a long time to reach that. It's pretty much linear, and it's pretty much boring.
Well,
as investment goes, but it's how it's done, right? And consider this as an insurance policy. That's the best approach, right? Ask yourself, if I don't invest in it, and I have a central data team that will eventually become a bottleneck, am I exposing myself to the risk of losing those great business opportunities I just missed, or investing in the wrong products or wrong customers, going to the wrong markets, not being able to see clear picture of my business, if this is something you can live with, and if not, then you will have to pay the premium for doing data democratization, self-service analytics.
Absolutely. I think in value, I mean, we could talk about this for probably another hour or so. This is just a little taster, and I'm sure that there'll be so many more questions, but definitely thought-provoking for the listeners. Obviously conscious of time, but of course, before we split today, where can people keep up? I know you're a regular speaker and you post a lot of content. Where can people keep up with you? And what have you got coming up this year? What can people look forward to seeing from you?
Yeah, I'm going to give, I think, one or two keynote presentations later this year. One of them is actually this week.
Nice.
And there is a data visualization summit in Berlin, and the other would be in Amsterdam in July. Beyond that, I would say the most exciting thing I'm working on right now would be a little bit outside of my comfort zone. I'm working on a community project that is focusing on utilizing LLM to teach kids to code. I started coding with my son when he was 6 years old, and
wow.
I really see the spark in his eyes when we use platforms like CodeMonkey and others, right? And I was there to teach him the basics of coding. I wouldn't say I'm the best coder myself, but I guess the basics I know. So I was teaching him things like variables and loops and if-then statements, etc. Right? But I'd guess that people that do not come from technical background may not have this capability to teach their kids, right? So I'm thinking a solution that will utilize the fruits of LLM and AI technology that we are so fortunate to have these days to teach kids to code. And I'm doing this primarily, and this is, I guess we said we will touch this point briefly, to kind of future-proof my kids for the uncertainties in the employment market going forward, right? I don't know what kind of professions and jobs my kids will have. Let's say 15 years from now, it's becoming increasingly difficult to predict what skill set you will need to have and what should you invest in, and what kind of jobs are going to exist, what kind of jobs are going to be replaced by AI technology eventually. And I think basic coding skills are kind of it's not only the coding itself, it's problem solving and approaching problems in a structured way. So I'm trying to give my kids something, and I'm working with some great people on this community project, kind of open source platform for teaching kids to code. So it's still in stealth mode, but watch out for details on my LinkedIn profile. It's coming soon.
Amazing. We'll definitely keep an eye out for that. And as probably our grandparents wouldn't imagine the jobs that we have today, it's going to be completely different again for our children and grandchildren and future generations. But like you say, I think coding and problem solving mathematically is probably going to be front and center. Evgeni, it's been an absolute pleasure. Time's flown. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
And so listeners, until next time, ciao for now.
Thanks, Matt.